So be sure to look for the Ag 21st Ag Talk Tuesday. Let's see. So Juliet, since you're on board, do you mind taking over hosting?
No, not at all. I can do that. No problem.
Oh, and one more thing I want to add, I might be taking off because I have to get back out and finish rating. So I'm sorry if I leave, I want to stay, but it's being recorded. I should announce that too. So if you missed any part of it, you can go back. I will send out the link after the meeting. I'll send out the link to everyone who's registered so that you can go and review the Ag Talk Tuesday session in case you've missed something.
So I will go ahead and take over the discussion. Kasia, I think do you want to also give an update on the potato from your perspective before you leave?
Sure. I don't really have a whole lot to say on potatoes. I really, my perspective is pretty limited, but I have seen earlier in the year, there's been a few unusual seed piece issues that, seem to be not uncommon related to, say, chemical injury or some other exposure, whether it was in the field last year or something that happened this year. And they're unrelated, so they're not from the same seed lot or anything. So that was a bit unusual. The second thing is we're starting to see rhizoctonia. We were seeing it a few weeks ago, but today as we're in our plots, we're seeing quite a bit of it. So that tells me that there's probably some rhizoc out in the fields. And if you happen to come upon any rhizoctonia, I'd love some samples. I need a few more to represent East Idaho. So if you have some samples, we'll be in Aberdeen today, tomorrow, and probably Thursday. So you can bring them here to Aberdeen, or you can bring them to Idaho Falls, whatever is most convenient for you. The other thing is, as I was driving down here from Idaho Falls to Aberdeen, I noticed going 80 miles an hour and 60 on the highways, that I was seeing varied levels of row closure. Some of the fields actually were at row closure. Our plots are not. We planted mid-May and we're not yet at row closure. We're probably a week away from row closure. And anyway, prior to that, I was seeing some unevenness from the highway, and I'm not sure if that's something other people have been seeing, uneven stands. I'm not sure what that was attributed to. Maybe a drier season in the beginning part of the planting season, but by now that unevenness seems to have disappeared. I'm not seeing it from the road anyway. I'm interested to hear what other people who are working with potatoes, what they've seen and what they're seeing. So that's all I have.
So does anybody have anything to add about the potato situation? Glenn, do you have anything to discuss about potatoes at this point?
Not really. I think the fact that you're noticing rhizoc, I think rhizoc we had this spring was particularly tough on rhizoc, so we may be seeing more of it this year for sure. Unevenness, I think any potatoes that possibly were planted into a field with a history of rhizoctonia and it didn't have a good seed treatment or in-furrow treatment, that's probably one of the reasons why you saw unevenness this year. The work we're doing at Miller Research this year, we typically inoculate with rhizoctonia. We've toned down the inoculum, amount of inoculum this year, and despite that, things were pretty hot. So certainly stressing any of the chemicals out there to its limit this year. So it happens every now and again.
What about the growth stages, Kasia? I know row closures already hit in the Parma area and probably the Minidoka area. I don't see row closure in the Idaho Falls area, but what are you seeing for the growth stages?
Were you asking me that question?
Yes.
Well, from between here and Idaho Falls, I saw fields that were at row closure, and I also saw quite a few that were not quite yet at row closure. So I think it just depends on planting date.
What's the status with any of the late blight?
Oh gosh, the most recent report, I don't recall. Does anyone here get the spore trap reports from James Woodall that he sends out every week? Last week's report, I don't recall if late blight had been detected, but it's definitely because of the weather we've been having, the high humidity, especially last week and the week before. We've had these what we call critical humidity periods, and James is referring to them as the CHIP model. When we hit these critical humidity periods where we have certain numbers of hours of humidity for a certain number of days, that's when we start thinking about late blight and being on the alert. And we've hit that with the report last week. We're still waiting for the report for this week. So in the Rupert area, South Central Idaho area, I would definitely be on high alert. For the other areas where we've had those critical humidity periods, I would definitely be aware of late blight, but it's not quite as, the risk isn't quite as high because we didn't have late blight last year, whereas that Rupert area did. So that's.
Now that you mentioned it, I went ahead and checked the cropalerts.org risk monitoring page that we have. And he shows the Agromet Station area in Rupert and the Golden Valley area as yellow moderate, where spores were detected at least one day this week. So again, the spores are being detected in the central southern valley, Magic Valley area. So if you haven't seen that page yet, it's cropalerts.org. And if you click on the risk monitoring, that's where the information is on spore detection. And there's also another page, Kasha, that we have available for spore detection.
Yes.
Updates.
Do you want me to provide that link?
Yes, please. That would be great.
Okay. Give me a moment and I'll add that here in a few minutes.
Okay. If there's any other additions about the potato situation, I see Brett Bean is on. Do you have any information on potatoes?
We had, I guess in the Magic Valley, we had a situation where we thought there might be late blight and it turned out to be gray mold. So the conditions are good for that as well. So.
Okay. Excellent. Well, I'm definitely not the potato expert, so I think we could move on to small grains at this point, unless there's any additional comments.
So I just wanted to add, I've added that other link that you can go to for the spore trap information as well.
Very good, thank you. All right, so we have the situation in small grains where across the southern parts of the state, obviously we have various crop growth stages. We do have growers that are starting to shut off the irrigation because we are starting to hit soft dough in some areas. So our last irrigation in Kimberly for the research station there for extension variety trials will be shutting off the irrigation after one last irrigation this week. We are expecting, because of the cool weather, unless it changes, and I haven't seen the forecast this week yet, but it seemed like it wasn't going to be really hot. So a nice slow dry down should be really beneficial to crop quality. But this is the stage where we're starting to shut off the winter wheat. The spring wheat is in various stages all over the board. We've got, starting in the Aberdeen area, we're starting to see grain fill going on. So we are also seeing some locations with some head blight popping up without inoculation. So I was in a field in Idaho Falls that were showing some consistent levels of Fusarium head blight. So despite the cool weather, in certain areas where you have consistent spore pressure, we are starting to see some Fusarium head blight. So that might be something to keep an eye on. The other interesting thing is we are seeing a little bit of stripe rust, not a lot. A little bit of stripe rust is showing up in our susceptible variety Brundage. So the winter wheat is really past any sort of susceptible stage. That's really good news. The spring wheat is most likely also past a really bad stage for reducing yield. We will keep an eye on that unless we're encouraging stripe rust. I don't expect stripe rust to be a huge impact in the spring wheat unless you have a super susceptible variety. And that's been a great year as far as I'm concerned for diseases. The only other situations that I can say is we have seen take-all both in the winter wheat and spring barley. I haven't seen any stripe rust in spring barley. I have seen cereal cyst nematode issues. Other than that, it's been a pretty quiet year. I'm still, from my personal opinion, the jury's out on yield. I'm kind of pessimistic, and a colleague of mine was out in the field and with me the last couple of days, and he was very optimistic on yields, but the weather's just been up and down. So if we have a good grain field without a lot of heat, it's potential that the yields will be good. But we have a lot of, in my opinion, thin stands. So mostly due to freezes and frosts and very unpredictable up and down weather. The predictions were for actual very warm June, July, and August. Well, June was cool and a surprising amount of spring rain. And July at this point has still been rather cool, cooler than expected. So is there any other comments on the grain situation? Trent, did you want to add anything about what you've seen in the field? Yes, we've seen take-all. Yes, you've seen some fusarium dryland foot rot up in the Montana area. I don't hear Trent. So Jen Vonderwell's on. Did you see anything or have anything to add to the overall situation that you've seen in Southeast Idaho? I know you saw stripe rust in Buell.
Oh, it's yeah, there was just little teeny hits at that time, and all indications, I guess, it's not spread. So yeah, you guys dodged a bullet for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the quality of that grain has got all indications it's going to be really good, as long as we stay cool, like you say. I think we're going to have some really good, nice quality wheat coming out of South Idaho.
Okay, good. The one little concern that I had was Idaho Falls showing some fusarium. All right. Is Trent back on now? Because the mute was on.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, I just kind of echo everything that you've said earlier. The wheat crop is definitely progressing. I know a lot of growers are starting to turn the water off if they haven't already for their winter wheat. Spring wheat still got a little bit ways to go. So far, the crop has looked very clean. I've seen some instances of fusarium crown rot in Montana. Take-all looks like here in Idaho, in the field I'm in now. Some spots. But overall, I haven't seen any stripe rust yet. Haven't seen any bacterial leaf streak like we saw last year. So I'm optimistic we're going to have a good crop, a good year.
Good news. Some areas I have seen a little bit of bacterial leaf streak, but it's not nearly as bad as one would have expected, given the multiple freezes and frosts and stuff that we've had. So that is good news. You're right. It's been pretty low on the bacterial problem.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, anybody else have anything to add? What about Belay? Did you want to add anything? Or Steve Hines? Steve, how's your...
Yeah, you know, I've seen just a little tiny bit of take-all, but not enough to be significant to even worry about. Other than that, things here look good. The winter wheat's certainly turning, and spring wheat is not very far behind. And I saw a report somewhere the other day that they're already starting to thresh some winter wheat over on the western side of the state.
I guess I wouldn't be surprised. I haven't gotten over that way too much. I did go through that area, well, I guess it was last week, and I didn't see any active threshing going on, but there was certainly a lot of crop getting near that stage.
Yeah, I was as far as quinoa this last weekend, and I didn't see anything I thought was quite ready to start threshing.
Okay. Does anybody have anything else to add? Britt or Glenn? Or Balai? Okay, no comments. That means things are actually nice and calm, and we're
Pretty
moving
quiet.
on in the crop season. Hello?
Pretty quiet.
Yeah, good news. All right, the other question is that, does anybody have any updates on sugar beets? Ann Munden is on. Ann, did you want to add anything to what you've seen for cereals or anything else? I can't hear anything. Okay, back to sugar beets. Anybody have anything to add to sugar beets? Or any other crop? Any other comments, any other insect issues? The only unusual thing that I've seen with insects this year have been a rather large number of Hemiptera, the bugs that are associated what we call with stink bugs. Green stink bugs, not brown. So those have been actually pretty common, but the insect pressure, as far as I know, is pretty low. I have seen the cereal leaf beetle, but other than that, again, a nice quiet year. Okay, given no additional comments, I think it's time to introduce our guest speaker. And hopefully we have a guest speaker today is Liang, and there she is. She's going to be talking from her office across the hallway from me. We're social distancing. And
Yep.
You got everything under control there? Do you need to share your screen?
Try. Share.
There you go. All right.
Okay.
So she's going to be talking about some of her projects that she has in both in the Aberdeen area on multiple crops. Okay, I'm going to mute. Go ahead.
Thank you, Julia, for the introduction, and thank you everybody for attending the talk today. So I'm going to give you an update of a few of my field projects on alfalfa, quinoa, barley, and wheat. So first, I'm a cropping system agronomist located in Aberdeen Research and Extension Center. So today I'm going to introduce 4 projects. They are alfalfa grass cropping systems, including the different alfalfa grass planting configurations and the water regimes, and the barley pulse crop cropping system, like diverse cropping systems and water regimes, and the irrigation management in BYD or barley yellow virus infected wheat. It's including barley yellow dwarf infection treatments and irrigation levels. And the last project is quinoa, investigating row spacing and different quinoa varieties and in response to different wheat competition. So the first one is increasing yield quality and economy of alfalfa hay through grass species selection and planting configuration. So this is a project funded by USDA alfalfa program. And we have 4 locations so far. is Hermiston, Teutonia, Hermiston, Oregon, and Aberdeen, Idaho, and this Wyoming and Colorado. So have 4 locations, and each of them with the same treatments. And so the objective of this project is to evaluate the yield and quality of hay produced in pure alfalfa versus alfalfa grass system in response to full and deficit irrigation. And then we also want to determine the overall economic return of pure alfalfa and the different alfalfa grass cropping systems. So for Aberdeen, I planted alfalfa last August, toward the, late August last year. And we had 10 planting configurations, so 100% alfalfa, and 75% alfalfa, and 25% grass. For this treatment, we have 3 grass species, ultra grass, tall fescue, and the meadow broom grass. And we have 50-50 split as a mix, so the same grass species. And the last 3 was the alternate row. So it's the same amount of seeding rate, 50% alfalfa, 50% grass, but we plant them in alternate rows. So these are some of the examples of our treatments. So this is 75% alfalfa and 25% tall fescue. So mostly you can see the alfalfa more than the grass. And then this is 50-50. So our 50% alfalfa and 50% ultra grass, but you can see a lot of grass. And then this is the same treatment, 50% alfalfa, 50% ultra grass, but these are planted in alternate rows. So 3 rows of alfalfa, 3 rows of ultra grass. We also included 2 irrigation treatments, wild water, so 100% ET throughout the growing season, and deficit irrigation, so 100% ET during the first cut and 50% ET during the second and third cuts. So we irrigate using the pipeline, and we have the nozzles with valves, then we can turn them on and off to create different irrigation treatments. So the dimension of each of our plot is 10 by 20 feet, consisting of 14 rows. So just kind of, we use the planter of the small plot planter, like 5 feet wide and 7 rows. So we planted 2 paths, make it 10 by 20 feet. So this is how the plot looked like earlier this year when we started irrigation. And then the alfalfa and the grass grow very fast. So about 20 days, they can grow very tall. So, and then just about 1 week, the alfalfa and the grass grow even taller. This is the mixture of alfalfa and the meadow broom. So we had the first cut on June 9th and 10th. So at the beginning, we wanted to have a sampling 5 by 5 feet. And then when we were in the field, we realized it was a little bit impossible. This is just 3 by 3. We cut the whole sampling area. It was a really big bundle, and we took all the samples back, and for the mix we separate the alfalfa and the grass and dry them separately to calculate the proportion of different species. We are planning to have 3 cuts in June, July, and August or early September. So the samples will be analyzed for forage quality. So the first the samples from first cut, we have sent them for commercial lab for nutrient analysis. So this is the hay yield from our first cut. So as you can see, pure alfalfa, and then we have the 75% and 25% split and 50% 50-50 split, and this is the 50-50 but alternate rows. So it's kind of interesting. I haven't conducted statistical analysis, so this is the average of our 4 replicates. So when we had the alternate rows, seems like the total biomass or the hay yield was a little bit higher than the 50-50 mix. So we are going to give you more update when we have them probably later this year, have the second and third cut. So the second project is the field experiments to incorporate pulse crops in barley cropping system to assess soil health and the plant water use efficiency. So in this project, we want to evaluate the effects of post-crop on barley production and the quality, and also assess the impact of water stress on pulse barley production and soil health. So in this project, we had 2 water regimes, 100% and 50% ET throughout the growing season, and 7 cropping systems. So this is the 7 cropping system. The first one is barley fallow as a control. So for this project, we plan to have 4-year project in a row, for 4-year experiments in a row. So the first one is barley fallow. So this is the first year we planted barley, and next year we're planning to fallow. And the second one is lentil barley rotation. So this is the year we planted lentil, and the next year we're going to plant barley and the lentil barley. So we have 3 rotational treatments, so lentil barley, chickpea barley, and dry pea barley. And the other 3 are the intercropping. So lentil, chickpea, and the dry pea intercropping with barley. So these treatments will be the same in the next 3 years. So this is how the plots look like. This very early in the season, because the temperature was relatively low this year, the emergence was slow, and this is how the lentil and barley emerging in the same plot. We are irrigating using pipeline, and the nozzles are the same as the alfalfa project. So, and then about a month later, so the plants kind of close the canopy, and still we can see the pea in the middle of the plot. And later of June, so the dry pea is flowering, and lentil is kind of flowering, but it's really hard to see the flower because the flower is white, really a little bit hard to tell from the picture. So this is how the intercropping look like. This is pea in the middle. So pea and the lentil are shorter than the barley crop. And this is kind of difficult to see that, but in the field you can notice in the intercropping, the pea and lentil are shorter. In the intercropping, they are taller than the monocropping. So this is so far we have a lot of sampling and a lot of measurements in the field, and we'll have more data to report later this year. Feel free to stop me if you have any questions. So the next project is irrigation management in barley yellow dwarf virus infected wheat in southern Idaho. So as we know, barley yellow dwarf virus is transmitted by aphids, and BYDV is common virus in cereal crops. And as we know, the virus can impact or reduce crop growth, and there are limited control practices for BYDV. And in our previous project, in the greenhouse experiment, we found barley yellow virus really decreased the root growth. So this is the treatments in the greenhouse. The controls was not affected. So BYDV was we infected the plants with aphids carrying BYDV, and then about 10 days we kill all the aphids. And BYDV aphids was the treatment. We leave the aphids, the BYDV carrying aphids, until the end of season. So this one infected with more virus in the plants. So as we can see, this kind of decreasing the root growth with the more viral treatment, more virus infection in the plants. Then we want to know, with this kind of damage from BYDV, how can we manage the crop because when the roots are damaged, how plant can uptake water, and how we can manage irrigation in the field. So that's why we develop a field experiment to develop irrigation management strategies in BYDV infected spring and winter wheat. So this is our first experiment in spring wheat. So we had BYDV infected and the control. We covered all the plots with the cages to be uniform for the treatments, and then we apply 3 irrigation treatments. 175 and 50% ET. And because it's the experiment including virus, we had 6 replicates. So this is how we set up the cages earlier this year. And this is kind of mid-June. The plants were really tall. So we were trying to make sure we have the BYDV infected in the plots. We had 3 infestations. That's why I kind of delayed a little bit for the whole setup of the experiment. But fortunately, we could see some symptoms with the long-term infestation. So this is uninfected control, and this BYDV infected. So you can see some of the symptoms here at the corner, because we released the aphids using some released aphids usually at the corner of the plots. And then on the side, you can see more obvious symptoms of BYDV infection. So now the treatment, because before we took off the cages, all the irrigation was the same, irrigated using a pipeline. And then when we took out the cages around the heading stage, we installed the drip tape irrigation. And the irrigation treatment was just started from heading or flowering. So this is kind of more BYDV infection and terminal drought treatment. Hopefully we can see probably some yield reduction from the 50% ET and the BYDV infection. And I'll give you more update when we have the harvest this year. And the last project is quinoa. So effects of row spacing on quinoa growth and weed pressure. So we developed a field experiment in 2018 and 2019 in Teutonia and under irrigated and dryland conditions. Under each water regimes, we planted 3 varieties, cherry vanilla, Oroto Valley, and bio, and plant them into 3 row spacing, 7, 14, and 21 inches. We divide each plot into weed-free and weedy. So this is how we planted in Teutonia. And this is after we hold the weeds as the weed-free treatment. So let's look at some of the yield data from 2018. So because it takes very long time to process the samples, we are finalizing the samples from 2019. So this is only the data from 2018. So we could see some kind of significant effects in variety, row spacing, and weed pressure, so under irrigated condition. So cherry vanilla produce more seed yield compared to Oroto Valley, and across all the row spacing and weed pressure conditions. And then the seed yield under narrower row spacing, like 7-inch, that means we have higher plant population and produce more seed yield than the 14 and 21 inches. So this is kind of equivalent about 4,000 pounds per acre, because we don't have a harvester for quinoa. So we just hand cut some of the plants in the plots, and we count how many plants per 3 or 5 feet, and then we convert it as the small area. So I think I'm more confident to report a yield as pounds per square feet rather than pounds per acre, because my harvest is only small sampling area. And then wheat-free, so the wheat competition kind of decreased about 60% of the yield compared to wheat-free condition. So this is about 3,000 pounds per acre, and this is probably less than half. Under dryland condition, we saw significant variety and row spacing interaction and weed pressure. So as we can see, the weed pressure, without weed pressure, the seed yield was much higher than the condition with weed competition. And then among all the interactions among varieties and row spacing, so cherry vanilla at 7-inch row spacing produced the most seed yield among all the other treatments, followed by bio and the other of these row spacing. So Oroto Valley produced the lowest, almost the lowest yield under each of the row spacing. So I conducted the quinoa trials in Teutonia from 2016. So at the beginning, I conducted the trial in Aberdeen, and then it was too hot. I couldn't harvest any yield. And then I moved to Teutonia, and that has been successful since 2016. Because Teutonia, the summer temperature was lower, usually lower than 90 Fahrenheit. I think it's more suitable for quinoa production. And the seed yield from plots with narrow row spacing was greater than wider row spacing under both irrigated and dryland conditions. That's the result from 2018. And also the wheat competition decreased the seed yield under both water regimes. And among the 3 varieties we tested, Cherry Vanilla produced greater seed yield than Oro de Valley. Well, thank you.
Is there any questions for she? When you go back to that first study, they talk a little bit about who you're targeting for your stakeholders on that. I mean,
oh, that's a good question. So when we were developing this proposal, we checked with colleagues and about what kind of cattle we can feed using this kind of hay. I think beef industry can accept probably 75 alfalfa, 25% of grass. And when we have the intercropping, probably for us, we can harvest them separately. And we can see probably the yield is probably higher and in the alternate row plant configuration. So probably it's a better configuration than the mix.
That's really, really interesting, because I never would have thought of doing the alternate row configuration.
Yeah, so it's kind of intercropping or alternate rows. So 3 rows here, every 3 rows we plant it like that. So I kind of surprised me when we see the kind of yield generally higher in the alternate rows than the mix. So there could be some competition when we plant them together. And also we will test the quality of the hay, see if there are any difference between them.
So orchard grass, you chose orchard grass mix with alfalfa. What would there be? Was that the suggestion of a stakeholder, or is that the normal grass hay that's fed to dairy and cattle, or well, I guess for the lactating dairy, it would be a different mix completely? Yeah,
probably. I think the leading PI is from Colorado, so he picked the 3 grasses for us. For me, I haven't seen it in Idaho, but I talked to growers. Probably meadow broom grass is pretty good grass. I don't know about the probably top fescue, probably a little bit coarse, but we need to see the quality when we get the data back.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Juliet, I would say that alfalfa orchard grass mix used to be pretty standard operating procedure for guys who were growing hay for beef cows in Idaho.
Okay. So Steve, have you seen any of this alternate row spacing, or was it all been mixed?
It was all mixed.
Okay. Oh, wow. So this might actually be something that is directly beneficial to the dairy too, or for the cattle, just for the feed for cattle.
Mm-hmm. Could be.
Huh.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, we want to see if there are any competition between them. When we see the yield is kind of really interesting. And as you know, the seeding rate is very different. So the seeding rate, 100% alfalfa, just based on 100% alfalfa, its own standard. And then the grass. So see, this is the 25% of grass. So even though we multiply by 4, it's about 10 pounds or 15 pounds per acre as the grass. And also it can decrease our producing cost because grass is probably lighter and cheaper than alfalfa.
Another question I have is, maybe Steve knows this as well, but have the people that you're working with in Colorado, have they tried feed barleys or triticale?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. I think he works more on wheat, but I thought about it about triticale as a feed material for cattle.
Well, I thought that
What
was.
I've seen triticale used for is if someone had a pretty rough alfalfa stand, but they wanted to get one more summer of forage out of it, they might put in a cereal to give them some mass just for 1 year.
Okay. Yeah, I have seen some growers up here that have had a poor alfalfa stand that they actually put in some barley.
Those oats and those cereals, they'd all be annuals, whereas what she's got going on is orchard grass and alfalfa.
Yeah. Yeah, everything is perennial.
Ah, okay, good point. I didn't think of that. I'm not a dairy person. That was really interesting. Thank you, Shi. Any other questions on any of the other topics that she was presenting? The quinoa that you were talking about, the hand weeding.
Yeah.
There's still no herbicides that are available for quinoa production. Is that correct for commercial production fields?
Pam is still trying. I think probably she can talk a little bit more about it. I know she has some potentially working well than the others.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she has tried herbicide trials in quinoa for a few years. I think she has some preliminary results.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Does anybody else have any additional questions on any of these studies?
Well, a lot of them are just initiated except the quinoa. I probably have more to report later this year or next year.
Yeah, that's understandable, but it is important to show people that I'm pretty impressed with the fact that you're really branching out into areas that would also be very pertinent for the cafe studies.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And the next Ag Talk Tuesday, the dean will actually be giving an update, and that will include what's happening with the cafe.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. If nobody else has any additional questions.
Hey, Juliet, when's the next Ag Talk Tuesday?
It's the 17th?
21st?
21st. Okay. Yeah.
Tarsha mentioned that 21st with the dean.
Yes.
Present.
Yeah. So on the 21st, it's the same time, same URL, and the dean will be giving a cafe and overall College of Ag and Life Sciences update. So I'm looking forward to that, to see what the latest is on the various projects that are happening, especially with both the COVID situation and the financial situation. I think I'm looking forward to seeing what's been able to be maintained as far as the momentum that we've got on some of the fundraising for the Parma and the cafe. So if nobody else has any questions, we will sign off for now and hopefully see a lot of additional people on the 21st to talk about all the crop updates. If you have any additional information, feel free to either call us or email, text message, and we'll try to get back with you, but we'll see you in 2 weeks. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks, you too.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.